Everybody's journey is unique, and we have the power to write our own story. We need to stop giving other people the pen.
Today in Chatter That Matters, we meet a woman whose life story reads like a novel of hardship, hope, healing, and heroism. Calissa Ngozi was born into trauma.
Told my prospective adoptive parents, that I was going to be, and I quote, a stupid baby, and they should send me back to Children's Aid.
Placed in the foster care system, and as a black baby adopted into a white family. From the very start, Calissa's identity was shaped by complexity, navigating race, belonging, resilience in a world that didn't always reflect her on the outside, even as she tried to understand who she was on the inside.
We walked in the house and then I saw her, and I knew it was her because it's the first time in my life that I saw someone that looked like me.
And what followed is a remarkable journey of overcoming sexual abuse, generational mental illness, the devastating loss of her twin children, and profound questions of her self-worth.
Is she going to send me back? Is she going to be upset with me? Is she going to blame me? Or even worse, is she not going to believe me?
But she doesn't see herself as a victim. She talks about valor and transformation.
I didn't grow in my mommy's tummy. I grew with love.
And today she's a mental health educator, community leader, mother, speaker, and the creator of the Oxygen Mask Mindset, which helps others breathe deeply, heal purposely, and lead intentionally.
We need to learn to take care of ourselves before we take care of other people.
Hi, it's Tony Chapman. Thank you for listening to Chatter That Matters, presented by RBC. If you can, please subscribe to the podcast. And ratings and reviews, well, they're always welcome and they're always appreciated.
So let's go back to where it all began and uncover how Calissa chose not to be a victim of circumstances, but a voice for change. Calissa Ngozi, welcome to Chatter That Matters.
Thank you for having me.
I set up the opening of the show talking about we really have to understand your roots to really admire what you're building today, not only for yourself, but for others. We have to go back to your mom, struggling with mental illness, and she placed you into foster care as a baby.
You know, I often talk about with mental health, I've been dealing with it from conception onwards. So my biological mother deals with schizophrenia. So she wasn't equipped at that time and wasn't given the resources to be able to take care of me. So it was decided by Children's Aid in Toronto that I needed to be removed and placed into foster care as an infant.
And so when you go into foster care, I mean, you really are a ward of the state. Somebody decides they want to make you part of their family. And it's interesting enough, it turned out to be a white family. How old were you when that happened?
So I was about 5 months old when I was placed with my family, and the idea was that it was foster care. So there was no premise of adoption. It was just kind of like a pit stop until they kind of decided what they wanted to do with me. You know, but my parents fell in love with me, and the process they started, they couldn't have children of their own. That's why they were foster parents. They decided we want to adopt her. So I want to go back a little bit and talk about my biological father. He actually tried to get custody of me, but he was a man who is from Nigeria, had just come to Canada, you know, was in school full time. And if we're honest, no judge in the 1980s is going to give a little girl to a black man who has no other resources, no other family around. So he lost custody, which is unfortunate, but I really do believe everything happens for a reason. With my now family, they decided to kind of go through the motions. You know, when you're in the adoption system, when you're ready to be adopted, you have to go to the doctors and you have to have a physical, and they need to, you know, make sure that you're okay. The doctor back in, it would have been 1985, I was born in 84, told my prospective adoptive parents, that I was going to be, and I quote, a stupid baby and a stupid child, and they should send me back to Children's Aid, that I might have a good personality, but that I wasn't going to function well.
By the way, how would a doctor get that out of a blood test?
Right. It wasn't just blood test. They also did psychological testing. So what I found out is before I got to my parents, I was actually placed in a couple other foster homes. And unfortunately, I was left in the crib. So I wasn't engaged with. So I did have some significant delays at that time that presented themselves. So the doctor kind of led with that and said, I don't think she's going to get any better. So she's damaged goods. You might as well try and find a better baby for yourself.
It's remarkable that someone would look at parents that are obviously very interested in adopting you and consider you just a parcel that could be bought at Walmart.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And you must give credible credit to your parents, because in those days, the doctor's word was almost everything in society. We never challenged it. So what gave them the courage to say that there's something special inside this young girl?
I think I really give credit to both of them for recognizing that that's our daughter you're talking about. And we're going to do everything in our power to rehabilitate her. And we're going to prove you wrong. And I think they did.
What age were you when you started to come to terms with the color of my parents' skin is different than mine? And how does that all work? And then as we leave the household, how does that all work in a community that might judge us differently?
We were judged. But what's funny about it is it was really hard for me until I was older to understand what that judgment looked like and what it translated to. I remember when I was a little girl, probably around maybe 4 years old, I went up to the back window in the living room in our house at the time, and my mom was beside me. And I remember grabbing her hand and looking at it. And I looked on the inside and I looked on the outside. And I said, Mommy, I think God made a mistake. And she said, what are you talking about, baby girl? And I said, well, why are we the same on the inside, but we're different on the outside? And at that moment, it was like, okay, well, now I got to tell her she's adopted, right? So that story kind of started of how I didn't grow in my mommy's tummy. I grew with love. We grew up predominantly in white areas. So for me, that's what I was used to. I was white. I was used to white people. I used to joke and say I'm toasted white bread. Do I really know who I am as a person? I think the first real bout of racism that I experienced was in elementary school. We were in a little town, all white day. They were celebrating. And I went to school and I had a white stocking on my head, a white shirt, white gloves, everything was white. And I won. I won all white day. And at the time I was like, oh, that's really cool because I'm in kindergarten. But looking back at the covert racism, that happened, that's a big deal, right? That would have been in the late 80s, early 90s.
I guess you're implying it was almost like they've done their best turning you into a white person. It's almost like we tried to do with the Indigenous when we took them to Catholic schools and said, I'm sure we can beat the Indigenous out of you. It's so strange how humans work.
Right? Yes.
You're also sexually abused by members of your adoptive family circle.
Mm-hmm.
How did you have the courage to speak up? And how did your adoptive mom respond?
It was 2 female family members at separate times. I remember just knowing that it wasn't right and it didn't make me feel good. So I had to tell somebody. And even as a little girl, I could distinguish between what's right and wrong. I grappled with it because even being that young, I still felt like this is my mom's family. Like, yes, it's my family, but really it's my mom's family. Is she going to send me back? Is she going to be upset with me? Is she going to blame me? Or even worse, is she not going to believe me? But I had enough love and concern and understanding and empathy and all these feelings and thoughts from my mom that I knew that she would be okay with it. So I told her, and it was straight out. And I said, Mommy, this is what's happened to me on 2 separate occasions, multiple times. And I don't like it. And I remember she just started bawling. She grabbed me in her arms and she kept apologizing over and over again and saying she had no idea and that she was so sorry and that she was very proud of me, for coming to her with what had happened to me. Now, it's important to note that my mom at that time was also working in the social services field, so she was a warrior, very much of this is my child. I don't care, if this means I'm going to lose relationships, which she did. She lost some family members who tried to blame me for it, said that I was a liar, but my mom stood by me.
In one of the interviews I read, you talked about how that was formative in terms of your ability to trust and ultimately heal.
To have somebody love you that much and that intently, to say, you know what, I don't care about how this is going to affect my relationship with others as long as you, my daughter, are safe and secure, that will go down in history as the moment of feeling that tangible love, like I'm important and, I am this woman's heart song.
You're tucked into this adoptive family. They love you. They want you. They've said they don't care what a doctor says, but mental health, which your birth mother has, seems to follow you around because now your adoptive mother has it.
So my adopted mom deals with clinical depression and anxiety. And to tell you that we went through it, we went through it. So my mother ended up being hospitalized for a little bit of time when we were living in another province. And it was because she crashed and she didn't have the tools or the expertise or the support to really navigate what that looked like. My parents ended up getting separated at that time. My father moved back to Ontario with my little brother, and I stayed with my mom, and our family really just unraveled for a couple of years. And, I remember having to grow up really fast. So here I am, an 8-9-year-old taking care of my mom. I'm tucking her into bed. I'm getting food stamps and getting groceries and all of these pieces, but I'm going to school with a smile on my face because I don't want anybody to know, what happens when I go home. I want them to see this happy, bubbly person who's got it together. But really, it was a tumultuous time.
You mentioned your younger brother. Was he adopted as well?
He was. So we have no biological connection. He's almost 5 years younger than me. And it's funny, I joke with him. I still remember when we went to the courthouse to finalize his adoption, because we had him from 2 months old. The judge asked me if I wanted a little brother. And still to this day, I say the only reason you're in this family is because I said it's okay.
I don't blame you, because this was in a podcast, I think, that you stated that you lived until you were well into your 30s, that you might develop schizophrenia given your family history. I have to imagine you must think you're walking around time bomb, that your birth mother, your adoptive mother. I mean, how do you deal with that? I think everybody listening has mental health happening within their family or to themselves. So how do you come to terms with this doesn't necessarily mean it'll happen to me?
There's this whole premise of nature versus nurture, and I had it coming at me from both ends. So yeah, I was terrified. I thought for sure I'm either going to get it genetically or I'm going to get it through osmosis. Like, how is it going to happen? I think that's where my faith came in, and just praying to God and saying, listen, like, if this is my journey, then I'm going to accept it. But please know, I've had enough trauma. I've had enough PTSD that I've dealt with. Adding another layer of dealing with mental health is a struggle that I don't know that I can handle. And I think other people that might be in the same situation, as me, that have family members that have mental health, that plays on your psyche, literally and figuratively. And, for me, it was a tough struggle until I was in my 30s to say, you know what, I think I'm okay.
How does a young girl saying, I'm going to go to school with a smile on my face because I don't want people to know, deal with everything that's happened to you? Your adoptive mother can't have you. Courts deny your dad. You go into a family, you're dealing with mental health, you're dealing with sexual abuse. And then the next thing I think that happens in your journey is you reconnect with your biological family.
This actually happened when I was 16 years old. My mom was telling me, hey, Sissa, because she called me Sissa, I think I found your biological sister. And I said, no, you didn't. Like, this is not Maury Povich. Like, it's not that easy, right, to find biological family. Now, my adoption was a closed adoption, but my sister is 14 years older than me. So she was well aware, of my birth and my existence. And Children's Aid actually gave her the ability to say goodbye to me at their head office. Before I was adopted. So my parents knew her name. It was a very unique name. So my mom was on a website called classmates.com years and years ago, and she was searching. And it turns out that my biological sister and my adopted mother went to the exact same high school, different years, but that's how my mom found her. I sat with that information because I was like, it was too unbelievable. I'm like, no, like, it doesn't happen. until I was a couple months away from my 19th birthday. I didn't tell anybody. I was sitting at work. I was working at a residential group home at the time. And I was on the computer and I thought, you know what? Something is pressing me. So I signed up for classmates.com. I searched. I found this name. I reached out to this individual. And again, being very bold, I just said, this is my birth name. This is my birthday. I think you're my sister. I received a response 45 minutes later from her confirming that that was my biological sister.
And so what happens next? Because that email coming in must have just stopped you in your tracks.
I do not like to show emotion. That's like part of my emotional dysregulation. But I lost it. I started crying. I was bawling, and the people around me had no idea why I was crying. They just saw me looking at the computer screen, and all I could do was just point at the screen, and then they read it, and then they started crying, and they were hugging me, and like I was a disaster. So we ended up. I called my mom, and I said, this is what happened, and she's shocked because it's been a couple of years. The rest is history. We set up a meeting. I found out that I actually had a younger sister that was born 2 years after me. And I met her, my older sister, and I met my biological mother.
Wow. How did that first meeting go? You must have been so nervous going into it.
I had a lot of feelings, Tony, everything from apprehension to anger to excitement. Everything was swirling in my mind because I didn't know. And, part of me had, forgiven this woman because it wasn't her fault, right? Like mental health is really tough. And if you're not given the tools to kind of work through it, especially with something like schizophrenia, that's really hard for you to be able to raise a child. But that being said, I'm human, right? And we have human emotions and reactions. So I didn't know how this meeting was going to go, but it was important that my adopted mom attended with me. So I remember holding her hand and walking up to the home and, her looking at me and saying, you've got this, baby girl. Like, I'm here for you. So I knocked on the door and I was greeted by my two sisters and we started crying and we were hugging. And then we walked in the house and then I saw her and I knew it was her because it's the first time in my life that I saw someone that looked like me. She gave me a hug, but then this is where it gets interesting. The first thing she said to me was, hi, Calissa, where have you been? Mexico? And I remember taking a pause and I wasn't sure if I heard her correctly. And I said, pardon? And she says, well, the last 18 years, have you been in Mexico? And I said, no, I've been here. Her schizophrenia affects her quite deeply. And, that means a loss of reality, a loss of consciousness, cognitively speaking. And that crushed me because I was like, wow, like, how do I deal with this?
How about your adoptive mom? Was there any anxiety with her knowing that this girl she just adores and loves and defends, she might lose to the realities of your birth mom?
Both my parents felt it. But they love me so much and they have so much trust in the love that I have for them that they got over it very quickly, right? Because I would think from their perspective, you're our daughter. We've raised you the last almost 19 years, but here are these people that you have a blood connection to that look like you. Are you going to leave us for them? Are they going to become more important in your story? That was never going to happen. Even now, I could never call my biological mother mom or my biological father when he was alive. I couldn't call him dad because they're not my parents, like they're not the people that raised me. I respect them. They brought me into this world, but John and Wendy are my parents, right?
You met your father before he died?
I did.
I mean, someone's got to turn this into a series. This is not a movie. This is 3 seasons.
I know. So with me meeting my biological mother and my two sisters, they threw a welcome home or welcome back to the family party a few months later. So my biological mother is actually one of 14 brothers and sisters. So I have 14 aunts and uncles and 13 still alive, which is wild. So which means I have a million cousins. I'm related to everybody. Everybody was hugging me and just it's so great to meet you, all these things. And then about an hour in, all of a sudden, this man walks down the stairs and he's staring at me. And I have no idea who he is. I'm just thinking, oh, maybe this is another uncle. Maybe this is a cousin. Who knows, right? Maybe this is Joe from down the road. And then everybody stops and there's about 60 people in the room. And I'm like, this is really, really weird. And this man stands in front of me. And one of my cousins says, Calissa, do you know who that is? And I said, no. I'm like, introduce me. And they said, this is your biological father. The world around me started spinning and I was in shock and I didn't know how to react. And here's this man. So the story goes how they found him is they were putting up posters around Toronto, essentially saying, Tony, we have found your daughter. They were saying my birth name, contact us. And I had no idea. And here's where it gets really wild is my cousin was on the TTC one day and she almost missed her train and she looked up and she saw this man. Now, my biological family had known him, because him and my mother were never together, but he was around enough that they knew, but they hadn't seen him since I was born. She looks at this man on the TTC and says, Tony, is that you? And he looks at her and obviously it takes him a moment. I mean, you're in the middle of Toronto. She said, it's Rhonda. I'm Jeanette's niece. At that moment, she goes, we found your biological daughter. We found Ngozi. He fell to his knees in the middle of the TTC. Now, you got to remember in Toronto, if a man falls to his knees, people are automatically going to be like, what's wrong with him? He starts crying and bawling and he looks at her and says to her, and I promise you, this is going to give you chills. He said, last night, I had a dream of a little black girl walking towards me and I didn't know what it meant. And now the next day you're telling me that you found my biological daughter.
Such a beautiful story. And what was it like to meet him?
It was a whirlwind because then I found out that he's married and he has 2 kids. So I have, 2 younger siblings and it's like, it's an incredible story. Unfortunately he did pass away a few months ago and, self-admittedly, we weren't super close at all. And I'm not close with my biological mother either, but I really credit them, for having me, and giving me away because I don't believe that I would have the life that I have now if it wasn't the case.
As much as I want to turn this into a more positive story, we've got one more thing I want to talk about and some profound personal loss, which is your twin sons. Is that okay to talk about?
Absolutely.
Tell us about Noah and Koa, right?
Yeah. So I had my boys. So I had Koa first and 2 days later I delivered his brother Noah. This pregnancy only lasted 18 weeks and 6 days and then 19 weeks and 1 day. When I delivered Koa, it was in a quite traumatic way. I remember, just being afraid that I was going to lose the second baby. Now, to kind of backtrack to how this all happened, from the get-go, I was taken off at 13 weeks off of work. I was working for Children's Aid at the time, and I was put on bed rest because, the pregnancy wasn't going well. And I was deemed high risk. I was already nervous. I had lost a singleton before then, so a single childbirth before then. I remember at 17 weeks, my water broke. And I didn't know what was happening because I'd never carried a pregnancy that far before. And I remember screaming at my then husband and just saying, I don't know what's happening. We went into the car. He dropped me off in emergency. And I still remember screaming in the middle of emergency, I think I'm hemorrhaging. Because again, I don't know what's happening. I remember sitting down on a chair in emergency and just rocking back and forth and screaming, I don't want to lose my babies, and them rushing me to the back and, doing an exam and telling me that one of my twins has 20% amniotic fluid left and the other one is still okay, but that I was probably an 80% chance of losing both of them. The hospital sent me home after a week and they said, just stay on bed rest. You can get up to have a shower, but then get right back to bed. I was nervous. I said, don't send me home. Like, I don't feel good about this. But they said, nope, you're fine. You come back next week. And then about a couple of days later, it was only 48 hours later is, when I had to go back to the hospital. And that night I ended up delivering Koa. And then 2 days later, they had to give me medication to induce labor with Noah. That in itself was quite traumatic. I remember going home and lying in my husband's lap and just crying uncontrollably, and he was crying with me. And I remember, and I can tell you, quite frankly, that is the only time in my life that I didn't want to go on. That I had thoughts of unaliving myself. It was momentary. It didn't last, but it was real. It was tangible because I just didn't understand why God would do that to me. Why would you take 3 children from me? And then I remember when we went to a doctor, probably about a month and a half afterwards, because we were doing fertility. But before we went back to the fertility specialist, I had to be cleared by the OBGYN. And I'll never forget this. I felt that I was ready to try again. And the OBGYN looked at me and he said to me, well, how do you know you're ready when you wouldn't even hold your first son? And I remember just crashing and being like, how could that man say that to me? Like, I'm already going through enough stress and depression. And now you're going to make me feel guilty because my first son, the way that he was delivered, it was traumatic. And I needed a moment. I couldn't hold him. And that's a moment that I'll regret for the rest of my life. But I didn't need him to throw that in my face. It was tough. We had to navigate so much. But, luckily, I was able to get pregnant again with my rainbow babies.
One of the real gaps in our healthcare system right now has been mental health. How do we help more Canadians access the healthcare that they need so that they're better able to then continue to live their fullest lives?
That was the voice of Andrea Barrick, who's been on the show many times. And she'll talk about why mental health is one of the focal points for RBC and the RBC Foundation in terms of giving back to clients and community. We come back. Calissa and I talk about one of her desires, and that's to leave a legacy to her 2 children, that a single mom can have purpose, pursuit, and still have all the love that they need to guide them as they move from being young adults to adulthood.
Hi, this is Tony Chapman, host of the radio show and podcast Chatter That Matters. Did you know that only 1 in 5 youth with a mental health illness can get access to the care they need? Well, a big shout out to the RBC Foundation and RBC Future Launch for supporting over 150 youth mental health organizations. And in doing so, they help youth and their families get the care they need and deserve.
My personality has always been as a helper. And I didn't ever want to feel like I was burdening anybody else. So instead, I tried to be the light. I'm very much from victim to valor.
Joining me today is Calissa Ngozi. She's a community leader, health educator, mother, speaker, and the creator of the Oxygen Mask Mindset, guiding others to breathe deeply, heal purposely, and lead intentionally. Some people that have suffered such incredible trauma as a child choose to repurpose their life to help others. They just decide, this is what I'm on for. I have context, I have personal pain, I have found a way to go through it. And it seems to be, that's your situation as well. I mean, even from high school, when you worked in a residential home, you've always chosen to find a way to help others. I'm curious why you think the compass was set in the sense of, I'm going to be someone that helps and guides versus someone that is helped and led.
For me, it is a calling. It absolutely is a calling. I think that, it's my purpose. And I think that, God knew that when making me. And I think the other part of this is how I was raised and what I was surrounded with. Some people would have crashed and burned, and that's not my story. I'm very much from victim to valor. And, I felt that it was my purpose to use the tools, and the expertise that I've gained personally and professional to help other people through it. If I didn't, and if I don't continue to, that would be very detrimental to my own self-healing and to my own journey of self-improvement and self-love.
When do you feel you've been able to walk out in society with who you are versus the mask you put on when you were younger, saying, I'm a happy kid, knowing that there was just chaos behind you?
My personality has always been as a helper. That's why I'm in the helping profession. And I didn't ever want to feel like I was burdening anybody else with my story or my circumstances. So instead, I tried to be the light. I tried to be the one that was funny, that was happy, that was engaging. But that can get overwhelming. Even now, there's times where, you feel like at times you're wearing a mask, but you have to be able to shed it. I read a quote once, and essentially it said, even the strongest people need someone to hold their hand and tell them it's going to be okay sometimes. And I really feel that I fall into that. I've done a lot of work, and some of that is through therapy and talking and being vulnerable, which is not something that I've ever really liked to do, but it has helped me to understand and I think be better in the profession that I'm in.
Let's talk about the oxygen mask mindset, because this is something you believe in and something that you've seen proof by applying it to the people that you help. So just share with the listeners what this is, how it manifested, and why it's so material to who you are today.
So the oxygen mask mindset is a framework that I created, which essentially means that we need to learn to take care of ourselves before we take care of other people. We live in a society that glorifies exhaustion. And burnout is seen as something that's good because you're working hard, you're going to get those accolades, but it is not good for you. It's not good for you emotionally. It's not good for you cognitively, mentally, socially, all of those pieces. So, I really kind of break it down for people by giving them, the tips and the tricks and the tools as to how to put yourself forward. And I often hear from people, well, it's easier said than done. Like, I just don't have enough time in the day. I will die on this hill. There is not one person in this world that cannot carve out 5 minutes of personal time for themselves. So whether it is, when you wake up in the morning, before your spouse gets up or your kids get up or before your cats get up if you're single, whether it is 5 minutes before you lay your head down on the pillow, I don't care if it's 5 minutes in the bathroom and you're doom scrolling on Instagram, you need to find that special time for yourself so that you can kind of reconnect, recollect, and reevaluate, where you're moving forward.
So describe it. Give me a sense of what 5 minutes in the morning can do to have a profound difference in terms of someone's ability to approach their day and often the complexities and chaos that we're all experiencing out there.
Well, it does take, scientifically it's stated, 30 days to learn a new habit. One of the things that I often talk about when I'm doing keynote speeches and workshops is I put out a challenge. And my challenge is I want everybody to grab 30 sticky notes. And the point of this is when you wake up every morning, one of the first things you do is what? You go to the bathroom. So you go into your bathroom, there's going to be a pen and the sticky note, and you're going to write something about yourself that's positive. So this is where positive affirmations come to play. I want you to write something positive about yourself. So whether it's I'm beautiful, I'm handsome, I'm worth it, whatever it looks like for you. After 30 days, your mirror is going to be full of positive affirmations. And that's going to help to rewire your brain cognitively. And it's going to help you understand and start to believe in what you're saying. And I think that we live in a world that we kind of forget to praise ourselves. We forget to praise other people as well.
What's next for you? I mean, you mentioned your rainbow children. You're the mother of biracial children. You're dealing in a very unique time in society where everybody's trying to come to terms with their identity and why they matter and what their sense of meaning is. How can you apply this calling, the circumstances you've overcome, to help others that are also looking to put their hand up and have it held?
I think one of the first things that we need to do is talk to each other. I think the more we talk about mental health and we talk about struggles and traumas and things that we're going through, people are going to start to resonate with it and understand that it's okay. One of the things that I often say to clients and to students at, the college that I teach at and people that I speak with is it is okay to not be okay. Just don't live there. Go through all the feels, whether you need to cry, whether you need to yell or scream, whatever it looks like. We're living in a world that is full of toxicity right now. We have toxic relationships, whether it's personal or whether it's professional. The world is kind of crumbling a little bit and it's a little scary. And I think more of us need to step out and start talking about what that looks like. With my framework, the Oxygen Mask Mindset, I'm actually writing a book. That's what it's called, the Oxygen Mask Mindset. And, I'm really going to unpack and talk about what's happening right now and how, as a society, we can work through it together.
You got your book going, you're teaching at Mohawk, you're a speaker, you're adored, you're in the media all the time. It was exhausting doing research for you, by the way. You've got so many things going on. What do you think the next 10 years are going to be for you that you look and say that was time well spent?
It's interesting. I self-identify as being neurospicy. So I myself have ADHD and I also have anxiety. It gives me anxiety sometimes to think way too ahead, but I'm also type A. So make that make sense. The biggest thing that I need to do to feel accomplished is to create a legacy for my children. So I have almost 12-year-old twin boys, and I'm actually blessed to have a really amazing ex-husband who I co-parent with. And, I'm trying to build something for my kids to know, my mom's a single mom. But look what she's been able to accomplish. Look what she's been able to be successful with. I want to give them something to work towards. And I think for myself, I often say, as long as I'm able to lie my head down on my pillow, and when I wake up in the morning, I'm happy and I feel accomplished. I've helped people. I've got my messaging out there to who needs to hear it. Then that's where my success is.
Do you feel that your calling is also meant for you to blaze this path alone? Or do you think that one day you're going to be able to sort of surrender some of that veneer and find love with somebody that says we can be on equal terms and move forward?
I am not meant to do life alone. I know this of myself. I'm meant to be married again one day. Dating is a dumpster fire. But I really feel that my person is out there, and maybe I've met them already. Maybe I haven't. But I'm excited for what this journey is going to bring.
I've just so enjoyed you. And I always end my podcast with my 3 takeaways. And I'm actually going to do this one as a very unique one, from and to. First one is, when you held your adoptive mother hand and you wanted to know, did God make his mistake? And she said, you didn't grow in my tummy, you grew in love. And I thought that was one of the most beautiful statements that I've ever heard, that because love conquers DNA. The next one is when you basically just said, I had to make a choice between being victim or valor. I'm not sure there's that many people would have overcome the circumstances you did. Even one of those might have stopped many in their tracks. But for some reason or other, you just put these all in the knapsack as circumstances that not only you overcame, but you learned from and you can help others with. And then the last one is exhaustion to enlightenment. Even what you said is, to people that are suffering with mental health, it's okay to feel that way, just don't stay that way. To me, it's really this incredible, magical journey you're on, that instead of finding yourself buried in cement, you constantly find this as an opportunity to just keep moving forward and helping others with it. So how do we get hold of you? If people want to know more about Calissa, what would you do?
So my Instagram is, and my LinkedIn, at Calissa Ngozi, or you can head over to my website, which is www.calissangozi.com.
So joining me now is Andrea Barrick. She's a Senior VP of Sustainability and Impact at RBC. Andrea, welcome back to Chatter That Matters.
Thanks, Tony. So great to be here again.
I think it's important to unpack just the kind of role that you're playing, because you go sustainability and impact are really, to me, very different words. Tell me a little bit more about your mandate.
Sure. I mean, I think, as a corporation, we live by our purpose, which is helping clients thrive and communities prosper. And so my job is actually helping the entire organization, wherever we are, demonstrate that we are helping communities to prosper. How are we having a positive impact?
How much of that halo actually spills off into the RBC brand so that people realize that there's much more to the brand I'm doing business with, and the fact that you have this reach out there that really has nothing to do with credit cards and mortgages and everything to do with giving people a helping hand or a hand up?
People want to do business with companies that align to their values. And so our customers feel good about RBC and the work that we're doing. And when consumers are asked, particularly in Canada, which is our major market, what bank do you think is helping society? RBC is top of mind. And I think that is because of the work we do.
Well, I read the statistic that RBC and the RBC Foundation is the largest source of funds, and I would argue also emotional and intellectual capital to mental health in Canada.
We came at it 2 different ways. One is we have a huge history of supporting youth, providing youth with the skills to be successful in the future of work. And what we noticed in that work is that if you don't have strong mental health, you can't actually get the skills you need to be, that is one of the skills you need to be successful. So we came at it from that more sort of skills and helping youth overall with their preparation to be successful in their lives. We also had a history of helping broadly all Canadians have better access to healthcare, because healthcare creates the stability that people need to then have the futures that they want financially. And so one of the real gaps in our healthcare system right now has been mental health. How do we help more Canadians access the healthcare that they need so that they're better able to then continue to live their fullest lives, be their best selves, contribute to the economy, contribute to their families, their neighbors? So I think where RBC is sort of special in a way is that they actually really just seek out where the gaps are.
For people listening that really want to make an impact on the planet, put a dent in the universe, a positive dent, what advice can you give them to find that place where they feel they can chase that purpose make a meaningful difference?
I have a job that obviously has a positive impact, just the nature of the role and the work that I do. But I talk to, thousands of our colleagues at the bank, certainly about what each of them can do in their own jobs. And the stories that they tell me are quite incredible. Local branch employees, for example, that will notice a family is struggling and will be able to proactively step in and offer assistance so that they don't get into trouble. That has an enormous impact. Or, we have people who work in, sort of risk, sort of anti-money laundering, and, the work that they do helps stop child trafficking. No matter what your job is, you can find what that purpose is and how you can make a difference, even if it is just being the best colleague that you can be and making people around you feel like they belong and are included in your workplace.
These are words of wisdom that we can all benefit from. So I appreciate you joining me on Chatter That Matters.
Always nice to chat with you, Tony.
Once again, a special thanks to RBC for supporting Chatter That Matters. It's Tony Chapman. Thanks for listening, and let's chat soon.